Hello, everyone. I think you're mostly on mute. We are actively using our chat today. Amanda Yo is going to be your chat MC, so please feel free to use the chat. And Amanda will reach out at points in time during our journey today to make sure that if you have any questions, those are answered for you. We'll just give everyone a little bit more time to join. All right.
I feel like I chose the wrong color sweater that clashes with my purple background, but next time I'll have a new outfit change.
All right, everyone in the chat or on your screen, raise a hand if you like the color of Victor's sweater.
Oh no,
We've got lots of hands. Abe, Danica, Sophia. They all like your sweater, Victor. I think it might be a keeper. Dawn. Wonderful. Excellent. So yes, use your hands, folks. Feel free to chat. This is extremely interactive. Of course, Victor and I are here to talk about a subject that we know and love. But again, you know, we are really ultimately here for you, and we're here for your questions. So I think without any further ado, I'm just going to hide my screen panel there. Welcome. I'm Charlene Sebastian. I'm Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at Minerva. Joining me today is my colleague, our co-founder and COO, Victor Tay. Excellent. We're extremely excited to have you join us. Before we begin, wanted to point out a few things. Again, already introduced most of you to Amanda Yo, so please, again, use that chat, interact with each other, ask questions, and be able to share and exchange thoughts as we go along today. Also, throughout our journey today, we're going to have 2 Slido polls. Slido is a really fun real-time polling software. The join information is here. You can use your QR on a phone if you have it, or you can link in if you've got a search engine to slido.com. You can enter in the participation code at the bottom. Everything you put into the poll is completely anonymous. All right, the outcome only will be shared, but again, completely anonymous. And Victor and I, while we're extremely enthusiastic about this topic, we've been in this industry, like many of you, for a number of years. We've kind of earned our stripes with some of the challenges we're going to talk about today, and we've also navigated some of those solutions. Always check in with your own trusted partners that you work with as you think about how you can apply some of what you've learned today, and as you go ahead and make changes within your own organization. So we'll dive right in. So really, why did Victor and I, stay in the AML industry? It's not always an easy industry to navigate. Working in the banking system, it can be quite challenging in terms of, constant requirement to justify your program spend, to stay on top of things, and even in certain cases, be able to catch up because things are challenging, or you're getting more information or inaccurate information and not the right things to help you move through the program. And that's really because at the end of the day, AML is a focus in the financial services industry where you can really give back to your community, where you can actually win by being able to help our law enforcement, help our governing agency, FinTrack, and even some of the global bodies that get involved in some of the cases that we've seen recently, especially around human trafficking, gun trafficking, and drug trafficking. It's an opportunity in a financial services business in order to make change. But again, there's lots of problems, as many of you are aware of, who have been AML practitioners out there in the industry for quite some time. There are lots of challenges. And as you quickly find out when you're an AML practitioner, AML is all about your data. And ultimately, being able to win is really about managing your data effectively, what data you need, what the useful data, what the relevant data is. 3 key elements of managing a strong data governance program so you can ensure that you're keeping that data that you're harvesting safe, clean, and you can use it in an ongoing way. And then ultimately, how you can actually turn that, what is a very expensive proposition, investing in your data, into a competitive advantage. So again, in order to really understand data and why it's such a significant challenge or an important element to manage, we want to dive into some of those specifics around that problem. Across the world, they estimate that the AML spend within financial services organizations is about $214 billion per year. That translates into an average spend per bank on KYC and AML processes of about $48 million per year. That is a huge, huge investment. And again, not only is it a huge investment, but there's high stakes in AML. There's an imperative to get it right, not only from the perspective of maximizing that spend and being able to live into the requirements from our regulators, but really there's an incentive to ensure that you're complying and looking at your information in the best way possible. Fines are significant, and these are just 3 examples of fines that occurred this year alone in 2023. So if we think about that $42 million per spend per average on a bank to get your KYC and AML data right, you're facing much, much higher fines if you get it wrong or end up avoiding it altogether, not to mention the reputational implications. So this is our first poll. We really wanted to get a sense from you. What are your biggest data challenges? So if you can turn to Slido and you can just use your QR, you can fill in these selections. Are you struggling with getting the right sources? Do you have the relevant sources that you need? Or are you adding in information that might be interesting, but really not targeted on the AML conversation? Are you missing data? Do you have, and are you incorporating things like adverse media and social information that's relevant to financial crime into your program? What is your accuracy challenge? Do you have solid accuracy in things like entity resolution, finding the right profile, and then applying things like PEP identification and sanctions information effectively to that information? Excellent. We'll just give everyone a chance to vote, but it looks like cleaning up data quality, so looking at source data, duplicates, and missing information, is topping our chart. So Victor, I think you and I are very, very much in touch with what that looks like. Victor and I have spent a lot of time in the trenches cleaning up data.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Selecting the right sources, absolutely, that is critical. We have a saying here at Minerva, you don't need fancy, but you need strong. So not all data sources are created the same way. So we'll take a look at that. What does that actually mean in terms of your AML program maturity mapped against what it is you need to tackle in terms of your AML requirements? And I think that this particular depiction really demonstrates that intersection of what's required versus what you need to progress your maturity in your program. Again, our belief here is that you need to slay the basics. You need to have a strong foundation to your core data. That is things like making sure you have the right names. Do you have aliases? What about address information? Not only a current address, but historical addresses, so that you can map information to that and understand if there are correlations or relationships within your remaining customer base. Making sure you've got access to occupation and industry information, source of funds and wealth, and beneficial ownership. It's incredibly important, especially as you progress into the risk assessment step of your AML value chain, that you also augment that with open source. For those who operate in Canada and are familiar with the FinTrack term reasonable measures, you'll find that open source or accessing open source data to do some of that due diligence is one of those eligible items around demonstrating those reasonable measures. So again, augmenting with adverse media, social information, search engine output, etc., is really, really critical. And then it's about being able to apply the solid foundation that you've created to understand your customer behavior. What are they doing once they've been allowed into your ecosystem, and how is their risk profile changing over time? I had the opportunity to participate in the Canadian MSB Association fall conference last week, and there was a great question asked, about a criminal that had entered into their ecosystem. When they onboarded, they were not under review by police. They had not been arrested. They had not been charged, nor had they been found guilty. How do you proactively find that? That is through ongoing monitoring, and it's incorporating those key basic data sets like adverse media combined with address and alias information to be able to detect risks on an ongoing basis. And then from there, that allows you to move to that proactive phase, that ability to actually stay ahead of risk in your ecosystem. By having the solid foundation, building on that through ongoing monitoring and examining transactional behavior in your ecosystem, you can then successfully move to that stage where you're actually getting ahead of things and you're not allowing that risk to enter into your organization before it has that chance to become a headline. So again, even getting the foundation right can be a challenge. We see a lot of high profile kind of data problems that are within that data. The most common are listed here on the side. So missing or incorrect information, data errors like duplicates or inconsistency, and even outdated information or irrelevant information. And when we talk about irrelevant information, it's really, really important to think through that, to think about what your use case is and what your objective is. Dark web data, as a for instance, is really a really great opportunity for looking at potential fraud, the reuse of telephone numbers, the reuse of IDs, the reuse of addresses. But is it really needed to mature you through that AML fraud pyramid that we just saw? Or do you need to double down on things like adverse media, which is publicly published and easy to defend when you're sitting in front of your regulator or you're called to testify? So again, turning it over to Victor about how do you solve some of those challenges around data? Victor?
Yeah, thanks so much, Char. At the beginning of Char's talk, she talked a little bit about how AML and setting up an AML program is a data problem. Everything that we're trying to accomplish, from screening to reporting to showing that we're doing the right things and compliance, revolves around having good, clean, quality data. So not having or not underpinning our program with a strong data governance framework just seems absolutely crazy to me. Now, data governance is a much larger and beefier topic and probably deserves its own webinar in itself. But today, one of the things that I want to do is focus on 3 things that I feel are most important to running a successful program. The first one being data lineage. How do we get the information from point A all the way to point B? What happens along the way? Are we amending the information? Are we enriching the data? Are we deleting duplicate records? We have to understand the entire processing and the supply chain. Number 2, it's about reliability. How do we know our data is coming from a reliable source? Is it from a website that has limited controls that anyone can change? Or is it from a strong data provider that has good fundamental data governance principles in place? Here's a little secret. Just because you're buying information from a big brand name provider does not automatically equate to accuracy and reliability. The last piece is around data accuracy. How do we know that information is correct? What controls, what validations have we placed on ourselves as we're looking at the information? Now, no data set that I've ever come across is 100% accurate, but understanding where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are in the information is critical to making good decisions. And also from a model consumption aspect. What happens to us if we don't pay attention to these things? Well, this is where I'd like to throw in a little bit of a story time. Before my life as a co-founder at Minerva, I worked for a lot of different organizations, one of them being a big, prestigious brand name multinational bank. Now, they had the philosophy that since we were buying information from some of the biggest names out there, that it automatically had accuracy, reliability, and the proper governance in place. I've been always very skeptical of that, so I started to do some digging and asking the questions. Now, the really great thing was that every single one of our vendors was able to provide in-depth documentation, screenshots, their approach to data governance. And a lot of them had really great, solid fundamental practices in place. What wasn't so great was one of our largest data providers that focused on one of our most critical lists, the one that is absolutely mandatory for us to become compliant, was being pulled from a defunct website. And what was even more humorous about this was the screenshots that they provided for evidence included on it big, bold, red letters that said, "Do not use us anymore. We're no longer supporting the aggregation of these lists." And it was timestamped 6 months ago. So ultimately, that was incredibly embarrassing for us. It required a costly remediation. It required us to voluntarily disclose to our regulators that we weren't doing the right things. And it also required us to put contingencies and redundancies in place, which cost a lot of money. So what can we do? What happens when we do put a strong data governance framework in place? What are the things that we can get right? We can do cost avoidance. We have the opportunity, or messy data, sorry, is incredibly expensive to store, process, and make decisions around. We also have cost avoidance, remediations, and potential fines. The one other benefit that we rarely see or get connected to from a compliance function is we have the opportunity to drive revenue. We can turn data into a solid investment. I'm going to use a little metaphor here related to the F1 race since it's launching in Vegas today. And let me tell you, the hardest thing of this presentation was trying to figure out if this was a metaphor or an analogy. And I think we finally nailed it.
I think I'd like to ask the audience to raise hands, Victor. So some of our AML practitioners out there and other folks who've joined us, do you ever feel like this in your day-to-day AML program? I know I have.
Absolutely. Every single organization that I've worked with, the AML compliance team has always been perceived as the brakes of the organization. The business comes to us and says, hey, we want to launch into a new customer segment, cannabis, crypto, gaming. AML compliance is there to say, hold on, wait a second. When we want to launch, or when the business wants to launch new products and services like remittances into high-risk jurisdictions, AML compliance is there to say, hold on, wait a second. We are seen as the brakes. And to that, I want to say you're welcome. We are the brakes of the organization, and we're incredibly important. In the F1 metaphor that I'm using, the F1 drivers, in order for them to go fast, in order for them to win, it's actually not about the top speed. It's not about the acceleration, although incredibly important. It's about how they apply the brakes. Are they feathering the brakes into moderate turns? Are they stomping the brakes on hairpin turns? Are they taking the foot off the brakes and letting the car run on the straightaways? Knowing when to apply the brakes is what wins the race and allows us to go fast. And for a compliance professional, knowing when to feather, stomp, or let it run it's all about the risk-based approach. So how do we get to that risk-based approach? Shar, next slide. Here's a tale of two Eisenbergs. We have two individuals, same name, same location, varying date of births. This is information that we would typically collect as part of the KYC or CIP process. But just using this information, we are unable to tell that one of them is a super high-risk client, somebody that stole $116 million in crypto assets. The other one is a fantastic client, somebody who's going to drive and create revenue for your organization, and it is low risk. But we don't have enough information to tell. In order for us to do a proper risk-based approach, we need data, and we need good data. So what can we do? How do we get this information? We can marry the internal records that we've got and collected as part of the onboarding process to external information. We're looking at things like credit bureaus, criminal, legal, open source investigations, business registries, social, and adverse media. And we pair that with cutting edge entity resolution and AI to really understand things like the context, the sentiment, if this person and the behaviors are in line with our organizational risk appetite. We also can take a look at things like links and relationships and look at the various networks to understand network risk. And the outcome of that is two distinct profiles with two distinct risk patterns. On the left-hand side, you can see somebody that is ultra high risk, that is likely outside of your risk appetite, and is the individual that stole $116 million. On the right-hand side, you can see a low-risk person that would be great to onboard. And this information is processed in seconds, not days, not weeks or months, in what we typically see in the compliance and investigation turnaround times. By becoming more effective and efficient in supporting our overall business, we're ultimately becoming revenue partners, and that is how we win collectively. That is how we turn data into an actual investment. All right. Kind of reached the end of our talk, but really what we wanted to do is kind of throw out to three key takeaways that sums up everything. The first one being slay the basics. Charlene mentioned it at the very start. Get really good at foundational elements and collecting good, clean, quality information from onboarding all the way through the life cycle of the client. And this is going to help enable proactive AML. The next one, underpin your program with a strong data governance framework. This is going to help us reduce cost and avoid remediations. And the last one is leverage data. Become incredibly efficient and effective in your risk-based approach. And this is going to turn us into that sought-after revenue partner. Thanks, everyone.
So we have one more topic. One more slide poll today, and we'd love to hear from you on it. I know that data is a huge subject. I hope that we laid out the criticality of data. Data doesn't have to be overwhelming. It doesn't have to be difficult, but it does need to be strong. And in order for AI to be effective, you need that incredibly strong base. And that is what you saw in the tale of two Eisenbergs. That is really that data-driven, AI-powered outcome. And in order for that to be effective, you need that solid base, and that's what good data does for you. But we know that there's a lot more questions that you have out there, and we'd love to be able to do more of these. So we'd love to learn about some of the things that you're interested in. So if you could take our poll and share that with us, we'd love to do more. Great. So now it's time for Q&A.
Yeah, there's a couple of Q&As in regards to understanding. So one of the questions that we have is how do you recognize what is good data and what is bad data?
Excellent. I can start that one, Victor, if you want to finish up.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's two ways that I want to approach that question. I think the first perspective is from vendor acquisition. So when you are working with a vendor, it's incredibly important that that vendor shares with you transparently how they source their data, the frequency with which they refresh that data, what their internal data management approach is, what is their storage, retention, destruction, and security oversight policy, and evidence of that through something like a SOC 2, a completed SOC 2 exam. And so Minerva takes that very, very seriously, and we implement all of those elements. And you want to make sure that those things align with what you need and your risk appetite. So for example, if you are doing business in the United States, you want to ensure that your vendor provides you with data that accesses the US sanctions list or any other sanction list that you need, and based on the frequency of change in the United States, ensuring your vendor updates that daily and couples that with both automated and manual integrity testing to make sure that that data is accurate. And then I think the second part of it is data in your own ecosystem to actually enable effective screening and effective risk assessment. And the real answer is sometimes you don't know you have a data problem until you are presented with an outcome that might indicate there's a problem. And the most common output are things like false positives, or high numbers of alerts, or alerts that are steadily increasing. Or alternatively, you're not getting information back that you expect when you enter source information. And a perfect example of that is something that we're working on with a customer right now. They are challenged in getting business registry profiles. When we took a look at the data that they came to us with when they were seeking out our support and help, what we found is that the names that were being used for the entities that they were screening were actually not the legal entity names for these organizations. They were a small bank that had grown and cobbled together multiple data sources from multiple systems. And when they had done that initial integration, they didn't check to ensure that business names were actually the legal names. So when they were entering these names against business registries, they were getting a nil result.
I'm not sure I have that much more to add to Charlene's answer. It was very well done. Ultimately, the thing that I want to focus in on is really understanding our use case and how and why we're using the information, and ensuring that the data that we have is fit for consumption. So Charlene gave some really great examples, but to kind of build on that, if you've got transaction monitoring rules and typologies that look at things like cash transactions, but have no indicators on your transactions to indicate that they're trash, that's an example where the information or the data is not fit for consumption. If you're looking at high-risk businesses, but have no indicators of high-risk activity or businesses or any kind of lookups, that's an indication of potentially data that is not fit for consumption. So really understanding your use case, what you want to accomplish, what the outputs are, and then backing that out to understand what kind of information do you need as fuel in order to power these scenarios.
Great question.
And thank you. And, to be able to continue the conversations about data itself, there is a question about, the data is not always owned by the team itself. And so what do you suggest for cross-functional to be able to drive programs such as these?
Oh,
that's
yeah, that's a tough one. I hope I hit this one this bit of a nail on the head, and if I'm not, let me know. But I think the best thing that I can equate to that is that age-old conversation we have during data ingestion and data remediation programs, where we know that there is a problem that exists, but that data might be coming to us from our CRM sources, so our front office. And there's been this general perception out there that it's extremely costly and intrusive to make a front-end change. I think, and we're talking about things like really, really simple things to make certain entry fields mandatory. So you're collecting the data. So you're avoiding that common problem we reviewed at the beginning of our discussion around missing information. That the capture in your CRM system is complete. And in the case of that business versus doing as name or doing business as name, making sure that there are prompts and help for the front line to ensure that they are entering in the legal information, or using even document capture methodology to do that for you in the front end. So there's always been this perception that the business owns that data and it's extremely expensive and intrusive in order to change that data. If we peel back the layers, we often find out that it's not. So if we think about those stats at the beginning of our conversation, that on average $48 million a year being spent on this, the large and the vast majority of that is being spent through manual cleanup and interception processes in the back end. 75% of the AML programs are highly manual. So I would come forward with a clear view on that use case that you're trying to use the data for, where the data is broken, where the highest impact area of change would be that would help resolve the problem, and a bit of an ROI. Because again, if you're doing this manual and that's what's costing you the money, compared to making a front end change, the cost benefit could actually outweigh some of the potential impacts to front end change, for example.
I would add this to that answer. I'll borrow a quote from that Field of Dreams movie. Like, if you build it, they will come. And it really starts at the infrastructure. Have and start planning and thinking about that unified database that starts to merge all the information from the various departments together, your golden records, your universal records. Now, that might not actually come to fruition as all the information is pouring in, but at least you have that infrastructure. All too common today, what I see and across the various organizations that I worked for, is you've got a separate and distinct database for your wealth management. And then you've got a separate and distinct database with client information for your retail business, so on and so forth. It is so incredibly hard to piece everything together and figure out how many clients do I have uniquely across the organization, what products and services they have. When you create the infrastructure and start linking everything together, it makes it that much easier for us to take that next step forward and start working together with the various departments.
Okay, thank you. I think we only have time for one more question, given that we are at the end, but a question also in regards to the AI. So being able to use AI in AML, what are some ways in which you can recognize what programs are great for this, and how does AI fit into some of the AML programs that are out there?
You want to start, Shar?
Yeah, I will start. So AI is a great term, and I think again there could probably be about 10 webinars breaking that down. In fact, our CTO co-founder Damien Tran, who's actually built much of our AI program here at Minerva, will be doing a webinar on that. Essentially, AI is in almost every element of the AML value chain, and it is applicable. And we have to think about AI as an overarching term. There are various pillars within AI. Minerva most predominantly makes use of knowledge graphing. So when we think about knowledge graphing, that is the ability to cobble together the 100 or more places where we found the name Abraham Eisenberg and make sense of which ones related to each other based on information or anomalies in the name, the geography, and date of birth, and pulled that together and created those two accurate profiles. That's really knowledge graphing at work. And again, the foundation for that is having a strong data program and a strong data set that pulls in enough data and the right data so that you can overlay those AI models on top. I would say the next element that we make use of is natural language processing. And that is, you might have seen some of those risk indicators in the in the bad Abraham Eisenberg. And that is really from going out to all of those, billions of data points, using natural language processing to pick up the information about our search subject and correlate that and pinpoint it to AML risk to make that data relevant to the AML risk conversation. And then I think the third thing that really helps, and it kind of partners with that neural network knowledge graph element, is really how we look at phonetic matching. And we use a more sophisticated technique that actually looks at the entire string of, let's say, a name or other information you've entered in. And it really looks at that in context of all of the other pieces of information, extracts that much more deeply than some of the legacy, what we call name matching capability does. And that's where you get a higher degree of accuracy. So what I would say is, in this particular sphere of AML, where we're really focused on KYC, KYB, and the risk assessment, it's really using multiple pillars of AI methodologies, and it's using them throughout that entire value chain. So the search, the assessment and insight elements, and the profile accuracy. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I definitely think it did. Victor, do you have anything else to add to that?
I would just say this: AI is really good at looking at a huge amount of information and boiling it down to the so what and why we should care. So when we look at our overall program, any step and point along the life cycle or the chain where we're processing a lot of information, trying to make a determination, everything from onboarding, understanding the initial risk of the client, to transaction monitoring, to periodic reviews, that is where I think AI has a huge and massive opportunity to be able to reduce that manual overhead and that operational cost of manually looking through a lot of information and coming to that decision quickly.
Okay, well, that's actually probably the end. We're really over by like 7 minutes, so we want to be conscious of everybody's time. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar today. We will be sending a recording out. At the end of this, as you exit, there should be a survey that will pop up as well. But we'd love to hear your thoughts on how the webinar went, what you found most useful, and thank you again for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.